Well, hello, hello.
Well, hello, hello. Can't believe we are in the last week of May already.
I know this year has flown by. So, hello, everybody. I'm Leanne,
And I'm Jason, and this is Let's Talk.
and this is a space where no topic is off limits. We'll be discussing things from well-being and resilience, leadership, relationships, mindset, and today's topic all about money.
Gotta love money.
Gotta love money. Show me the money.
That's right. And here at Let's Talk, we bring different perspectives, real stories, and those honest conversations because the things that we often don't talk about are the things that actually matter most and that need to be talked about the most.
So, our goal here is simple at Let's Talk. It's to spark new ideas, to shift mindsets, and to give you practical tools that you can use in your leadership and in your life.
So, whether you are tuning in today for some inspiration, some growth, or just a fresh perspective, let's talk.
Cool.
So, welcome back to Let's Talk. We're in series three, The Art of Intentional Living, and we have been building towards this conversation all series. We've talked about clarity, we've talked about values, energy, building those robust systems for yourself, setting healthy boundaries, creating visibility, and decision making. And today we bring all of it into the arena that touches every single one of us and on all of those themes: money. Not money as numbers on a spreadsheet, money as meaning, as identity, as alignment, and as freedom. Money is one of the most emotionally charged topics in human life. And yet, most of us were never taught how to think about it well. And I can say that's been me at different parts of my life. This episode is personal for Leanne, and I think that's why it's going to land so powerfully. She doesn't just coach on this; she's lived it and lives it. From mortgage broking to neuroscience coaching to building programs that help women take control of their financial lives. So let's get into it.
I love that.
And
And it is personal, right? Because I was fortunate that I had good mentors, but most people don't. And that's really what we're going to talk about today. So let's talk about why money feels so personal. And I want to start with something that might surprise you all because money is not a math problem, right? We often think, or a knowledge problem, although that can lead into it. We often think that, if it were, financial literacy alone would be enough. We'd
mhm.
learn all the formulas, we'd follow all the processes, and then we should have money because we've followed the plan. But the thing is, that's not what happens for most of us, really, is it? Because people know that they should save, but they don't, or they try to and they can't. People know that most debt is dangerous, and yet we accumulate it anyway because we want the next bright, shiny thing. Many people that I coach know that they're undercharging or undervaluing what they do, and yet they keep doing it anyway. And I've also fallen into that one myself personally as a self employed person, right? You've got to put yourself out there in charge effectively, and that can feel icky at times. And why is that? It's because money is emotional. It's not just math. Money is psychological, like it's the way we feel about it, it's the way we think about it. But more importantly, money is identity. And your relationship with money was formed long before you even earned a dollar. And that's the truth of it. For most of us, before the age of 7, we had already absorbed our family's money story, whatever that is, right? Good, bad, or ugly. I know that I've heard things in my family like money doesn't grow on trees. I know I've said that to my kids, unfortunately. We can't afford that. We might think that rich people are greedy or have some kind of story about that. Um, we often think that, managing money can be stressful and, I'd rather not do it. So I'm just going to bury my head in the sand. The other story that I've often heard is that women aren't good with money. men are better with money than women, right? That's the story, the narrative, but it's not necessarily true. And the best one of all, I find, is that money is the root of all evil. And if you were brought up in a Catholic or Christian household, I'm pretty sure that one was drilled into you too, because I know that it was certainly drilled into me. And it's not. It's not the root of all evil. Um, Money actually gives us access to be able to do good things in the world. If we can expand our financial worth, we can expand the impact that we make. We can expand the humans that we come into contact with. So
Mhm.
it's a really interesting shift in our brain. And the sad part is that those comments that I just read, spoke to, they're not just throwaway comments. They become our internal operating system, right? And then that leads to our financial behavior that we run on. And the thing about operating systems, if you think about your computer even, is that they run in the background. We don't even know what systems are in play at any time when we're working on our laptops or our computers. Things just kind of work. We might know that we're working on this particular program today, but there's all sorts of other things behind the scenes making that laptop work. And it's the same with money. If our belief and our identity has a different operating system, then that's running in the background. And the sad part is that you don't see it because you don't see it, you don't question it.
Mhm.
And this is where we wanna kinda come in and say, "Start thinking about money," right? Like, I know that that's a bit of a tongue twister, but you can't just act one way and hope that things are gonna be different. We've gotta act on them again and again and again and change our programming, because if we don't change the programming, we're gonna be consistently wondering why nothing changes. And you can't out budget a money story if your internal system says that you don't deserve wealth or that it's evil or that I'm not good with it. Like, you can't out budget it. It doesn't matter how much work you do on the outside. If that internal dialogue doesn't actually meet that, we're going to have problems. And so this is the conversation of today. How can we align money to our identity in a way that serves us, but also has a positive impact on those around us, right? And that's the conversation today. And I'm super excited about it and very passionate about it because um, money is one of those things that gives us freedom. It gives us agency in our lives. It gives us choices. Um, and all of us want that. I think the greatest thing that humans want, freedom, truth and freedom. And today
Mhm.
we're going to really deep dive into that. So, Jason, do you have anything that you want to add or say to that?
Yeah, I mean, it just reminds me that, it's like your externally and your internal need to meet.
Yeah.
And if they don't, and if they're not aligned, then like you said, there's going to be problems.
Yeah.
And I've even experienced that in my life too, where it's like I have this internal dialogue around it, and it may be a positive internal dialogue, but the external is not, like, I'm not putting that same positive energy out there around it, or you get in that over, analysis paralysis, or I like to call the hamster wheel. And so, yeah, I mean, there is a lot of emotionality around money, and you know, um, and it's interesting, to kind of reflect back at times when I've been in different emotional states, right? It's like, okay, that makes sense of why this showed up money wise like this, or this, whether, I was in a much better space at a different particular moment in life. So yeah, it's definitely, it's very emotional, and and I know it's also very private too.
It's the taboo subject that most people don't wanna talk about, and yet it's the one topic that we need to talk about because humanity needs money to survive, right?
Yeah,
We
absolutely.
so
Totally.
why is it taboo? Oh, dear.
Yeah. So with that, let's delve a little bit into the neuroscience of money, which, Leanne and I love the neuroscience behind all of our conversations that we talked about, or that we talk about. So let's look at what actually is happening in the brain when it comes to money. So to your brain, money is a safety signal, and I can probably throw out 10 examples for my own self, when I've seen money as a safety net at different parts of my life. Um, so historically, resources meant survival. The more resources, and we've talked about this in previous episodes as well, the more resources you have, the higher up the food chain you are and the safer you feel. So today, I think more than ever, money represents security. Like Leanne was talking, it represents options, to be able to, go treat yourself for a massage or out to a nice dinner, when you have more resources available to you, right? It also represents stability and freedom, like Leanne was talking about. I mean, who hasn't, when they've had a little bit more money in their pocket, has just felt a sense of more freedom, because you just have a little more resources to access. So when money feels the opposite of that, uncertain, when there's not enough, or you feel out of control, again, your nervous system goes into threat mode. How we've said in previous episode, episodes, everything lives in your nervous system. Money does as well. And when you're in that space of threat, right, what happens? Just your overall clarity gets a little bit more fogged in. Like you can't see things as clearly. Sometimes you can only just see maybe what's, 5 inches in front of you, right? Avoidance increases, right? It's like, I don't want to go check my balances in my account because I don't want to see, you know, the low numbers they are, right? Or, certain bills that need to be paid or whatever, that avoidance creeps in. Then impulsive decisions spike, right? And I've known some folks in my life, some friends of my life that impulse comes in when they're in that scarcity mindset, and there's no clarity and avoidance of like, oh, I'll figure out how to pay it later. And then the long-term thinking shuts down. Like you're not thinking, okay, you're down the road, you're not thinking of your next vacation or whatever it may be. You're just thinking in the moment, which can get you in trouble sometimes, when you don't have that longer range thinking in play. So, so we need to think about it, that financial avoidance isn't laziness. It's actually your nervous system protecting you from perceived danger. I'm going to say that again. Financial avoidance isn't laziness. It's your nervous system, just like I spoke about a little bit ago, how everything lives there, protecting you from perceived danger. This explains why so many money behaviors that people beat. This explains many money behaviors that people beat themselves up about when they really don't need to. It's because a lot of times what's happening is you're paying attention to the wrong thing, when you should be paying attention to your nervous system and how to get that regulated and in control so that clarity can come in, focus, long-term thinking can get back on track. So some of the things that fall in this area, like I just mentioned, not opening bank statements, avoidance of threat, emotional spending, which equals self-soothing, a dysregulated nervous system.
I'm good at that one.
Yeah, exactly. Undercharging, as a self-employed individual, fear of rejection or not being worth it. I mean, my gosh, I mean, how many, I just think of how many entrepreneurs have that fear of rejection. I don't know, I'm not, I don't feel worth it. I shouldn't be charging this much and da 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 da. And hoarding cash without investing, that's not bringing you any dividends. It's not bringing you any more money into your bank account if you're hoarding it. hypervigilance around safety, overspending on lifestyle. My gosh, do I see, especially the younger generation, my gosh, on how much overspending they do on lifestyle. Um, the identity and belonging signal. So none of these things that I just talked about, none of them are character flaws. What they actually are survival strategies that outlived their usefulness. I'm going to say that again. There's survival strategies that have outlived their usefulness. Lan.
Yeah, and as you were going through those, Jason, I've seen all of them, and I know that I can emotionally overspend, to regulate a dysregulated nervous system, and then I feel guilty after it, which then makes my nervous system even more dysregulated. So, we all have these habitual ways of dealing with money, and it's so interesting um, because we do, and we don't talk about it, and then we're twisting in the wind about it. And the other thing I wanted to bring in at this point is also this kind of difference between a scarcity mindset and an abundance mindset. Um, because we can have wiring either way. And let's talk about it so we can build a bit of understanding. Scarcity wiring in our brain looks like something that's hyper focused on what you don't have. Like we're always looking at the lack, right? We're always looking what's not there. It's that fear of losing what you do have. So we can hold on to things really tightly and not have flexibility. A bit of rigidity comes into our being. There's
Mhm.
contraction. So we pull back, we play small in order to kind of keep us safe, right? When we're in that scarcity mindset, we're not thinking about the overall impact that we could have. We actually kind of play small to keep safe. And we often, in a scarcity mindset, have very short term thinking. It's
Mhm.
survival over strategy. I've got to survive this moment, as opposed to what strategy can I put in place that's going to support me for the future. We don't kind of have that future view where we're treading water here and now, right? In a scarcity mindset. And those
Leanne,
things,
can I put
please.
one thing in there?
Yeah.
So in that short-term thinking and survival over strategy, I think a lot of people who are unemployed, I think fall into that. Whether it's the short term, between where they were and where they want to go,
Yeah.
is because I've noticed this, I mean, here in the US with just the abundance of layoffs, of how people go from that. It's almost kind of like overnight almost. It's like they go from that long-term thinking of like dreaming and I'm gonna do this and da 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 to when they're laid off, they just switched short-term thinking. And it's just amazing seeing how that can even just happen overnight in a person.
And it's understandable, right? Because we have to survive in this moment. We're living in this moment. So I don't want to make us wrong for it, right? It's part of
Mhm.
our survival mechanism in order to do that. But it comes at a cost, right? A
Yeah.
huge cost when we kind of behave with that scarcity mindset. So if we look at the opposite of that, an abundance mindset or abundance wiring in our brain kind of looks like um, it's more open, right? Openness to opportunities. We can see things. We're not kind of blinkered and just looking at this one thing. Our field of vision expands when we're in a positive state. When we're in a threat state, our literal field of vision shortens, right? We can't see all the things that might be at the side. So, we're not as open to opportunity because opportunity could be risky. And at the moment, I'm already in survival. So when we're in abundance, we have that openness. We have that kind of long-term view and it's expansive. It's not just this one thing. There could be multiple things, right? So we've got this kind of long-term view that's very open. We're
Mhm.
more open to creativity and possibility. I don't know how yet, but I'm sure there's a way. Like we have a different mindset. And it means even if we hit a wall or a speed bump, we'll actually pull ourselves back up and continue with an abundance mindset. You could almost call this a growth mindset, even, right?
Mhm.
When we're abundant, it's more growth orientated. we're looking at creativity, we're looking at possibility, we're looking long term, we're looking for opportunities. So we've got that broader view. And the other thing about a growth mindset or an abundance mindset is that you have a willingness to invest in yourself and your future. And I think that's really interesting because many people um, don't invest in themselves. And I'm sure it was Richard Buffett. Anyway, one of the big money tycoons in the world made a comment that the best investment you can ever make is in yourself. Upskill. What can I learn? What can I do? How can I pivot here? What can I add to my life that's going to help me in that long term
Mhm.
and that future instead of just looking at the here and now. And here's what's really important to understand about this, scarcity versus abundance mindset is that you cannot choose abundance from a place of fear. Safety has to come first if we're sitting in a fear state. And again, this is normal human behavior, but we can override this, right? Um, so I don't want to make anyone wrong because we've all been there. What I want to do is say there are options, there are choices. We can actually do things different because safety comes first always. And if we are sitting in that fear state, we can't then choose abundance. It's just not going to happen. And this is why financial education on its own doesn't actually work for most people because they've got a dysregulated nervous system and yet they're trying to build strategy without actually doing the inner work. So you really have to calm that internal nervous system before the new information can actually land and then be implemented. So it's not about, um, let's just go and learn about math and numbers and strategy and plans. That's all good. But first, and we say this almost in every session now, regulate first, right? Like you've got to regulate that nervous system. So then all of those things that you're looking to do can actually land because it is almost an energetic kind of magnetism, right? If we've got that dysregulated nervous system and we're sitting in fear, we get more scarcity, but if we can kind of shift that internal state, then we get more abundance because
Yeah.
we're more abundant thinking. And that's the difference.
Yeah, it made me think, Leanne, when you were talking about the abundance mindset, right? Even when you're in those times, right, of scarcity, and it's so easy to fall into that first mindset that you were talking about. Um, one of the strategies that I have more recently learned about is like, when something good happens to you, right, throughout your day, is just to stop and pause and say, good things continue to happen to me. And it's amazing on how that can even just switch or tweak a little bit into that abundance mindset.
And even with me, Jason, one of my favorites is whenever I get to save money or somebody gives me a discount or I get paid from a client or anything like that, I just sit there and say, thank you for the abundance that's hitting my account today. And
Mm-hmm.
then that makes me, even if I'm not truly, like it makes me feel more abundant and then I'm more open to opportunity. It puts me into a better mindset. It makes me feel happier. And then I'm able to do more creative thinking. Right.
Yeah,
So, all of these things have a flow on effect. It's not just about money. Like if we, although this is the topic today, but if we can have more of an abundance mindset in all areas of our lives, whether it's opportunities that comes in, money that comes in, anything, right? The more we can pull that into our psyche and our spirit, the better it's going to be.
exactly. Exactly. Which I think, leads nicely into the next part of today's conversation is around money and identity and the who do you think you are, right? So here's where this really gets interesting and also personal because your financial behavior is driven entirely by your financial identity. I'm going to say that one more time. Your financial behavior is almost entirely driven by your financial identity. So the story you hold about yourself and money, which Leanne had mentioned earlier in today's conversation, that narrative started early on in life, like around 7 years old, which is around first, second grade. I mean, that's early.
Early. And
Um,
then that drives our life.
right, exactly. I'm like, can I ever remember back to first, second grade? Um, but so this story that you hold about yourself and money could be things like, well, I'm not a money person. I've never really been good at saving. I always end up broke at the end of the month or the end of the year. Wealthy people had advantages that I didn't in life. And I'm not the kind of person who talks about money, right? And as long as that story is running most of the time in the background, behavior will follow it. It's so funny because I literally was just having a conversation with a friend of mine about this exact thing that we're talking about right now. Um, and we had to put a pause in the conversation because that person had to go into an errand. Um, but it's interesting because we were just breaching the part of the conversation about that first, second grade, and then that's when the pause happens. So it'll be interesting to see where that conversation goes. But so as long as that story is running, the behavior will follow. And it's not because you're weak, because it's a consistency in your brain, right? It's a consistency in your brain. It works hard to make your reality match your identity. So if you don't rise to your financial goals, you're going to fall into that financial identity almost by default, you know? So that's where sometimes it's going to feel like you're going to be pushing that rock up the hill, right? But just know that when you get up to that certain point, it's going to be easy. But, if you don't, you're just going to fall into your natural financial identity.
And I think that's really sad that we don't rise to our goal. We fall to our identity, our limited identity that we've built at the age of up, that's been imprinted upon us around the age of 7, that's running the show in the background. And most of us have got no idea or no awareness about it.
Mm-hmm.
We don't know how to shift it. We don't even know that it's running. And I
Yeah.
think that's sad, right? Like we need to kind of think about shifting our internal identity so we can rise to the goals that we've got in place, not fall back to the the story that we've inherited. And I can give a personal story here about this, Jason, because I've kind of got it's a double-edged sword. I had parents who worked really hard and made things happen. Um, but also there was a bit of scarcity in their languaging, right? So there was a bit of both. So the narrative that I've got is that I have to work really hard for money, right? I can make
Mm-hmm.
it, but I have to work really hard. And it's interesting because I started my own mortgage broking business at the age of 28, right? I jumped out of a six-figure income and decided that I was going to be the captain of my own ship, and off I went into the world. And to the outside world, that looked like confidence, right? But I was terrified. I had my own money stories running that I hadn't fully examined at the time. And I had to
Mm-hmm.
keep kind of breaking through different things. I needed to do work on my internal state so my external state could actually shift. I had stories, like I said, about needing to work really hard. And I had 3 jobs. Like I was running this business and setting it up. And then I was also working in bars and clubs and restaurants to make sure that, I had enough money. It was like, I've got to work hard for money. And it was so interesting because I almost burnt myself out. And it's the stories about what it means to us, right? Which is really interesting, and even more so as a woman, and I don't wanna go into sexism and all of that sort of stuff, but the system didn't support financial success in women, right? So
Mm-hmm.
people even when I bought my first property on my own, the per before I became a mortgage broker, the question was, "Well, where's your husband?" "Well, I don't have one." "So who's gonna co-sign?" "No one, I'm doing this on my own." Like, but it was like, "Well, you can't do that. You're a woman," you know? And this was only 25 years ago. We're not talking 60 years ago, right? Um, so it's really interesting that these things still come up. So some of the stories, as I said, I had absorbed from my environment without even realizing it. And
Mhm.
like I watched my father wake up at 5 o'clock or every morning and he would glass blow. He was a glass blower. Um, and so, long hours, work from home, all of this stuff was consistent in my DNA. So when I started my own business, I was doing the same thing. I was starting at 7 a.m. I wasn't finishing until 9 p.m. I was doing all of this stuff because my story was you have to work really hard. And then the work that I've done then in learning the neuroscience, in learning the emotional intelligence, in learning the coaching has been as a starting point about my own rewiring first and then how I can help other people, right? But really, the reason I fell into this other side of work, the science and the EQ stuff, was because I wanted to understand myself. I wanted to understand what was limiting me in my own patterns, and then um, it's become about helping others to navigate the terrain for them. But it's a really interesting thing that we kind of go through. And what I know for certain, really, is that financial freedom starts as an inside job. If we don't do the inside work, then the outside is not going to give us what we want. And actually, most things are an inside job. You hear me say that a lot. It's an inside job because it really is. If we don't shift that internal narrative, then everything external is going to stay status quo. We're not going to rise to what we hope for because it's almost like this anchor is pulling us back. And I see it in all my coaching clients. I see it in the facilitation things that I do, that they limit themselves and they're so attached to their limitations. They fight for their limitations because it feels safe.
Mhm.
And then they fight from their limitations as well, right? And why not just eliminate the limitations? Like that's really what we need to do, that inside work to shift all of that. And and I know the other story about this is that I have kids that have just finished high school. They did their year 12 last year, and they don't have any awareness about finance either. So they're still not educating children at school very well around
Yeah.
financial literacy, around what to think about as an adult. So they're kind of coming into the world and they get money and they don't really understand it. And now that they're earning money, they actually give it to me to save for them because they know that if it's in their pocket, it will burn a hole in their hand. So they're
Mhm.
forced savings. And that was their idea. And I was very pleased with it. But they still don't really understand it. I mean, we were talking about credit cards the other day, and it was like, I want a credit card. I'm like, no, you don't, because you have to pay it back. Like it's not free money. Like, and these are the things that I wish that there was more education out there for the younger generation. So that way, when they become working adults, they actually understand paying themselves first, saving money, what it means, what good debt is versus bad debt. Like, not all debt is equal.
Yeah.
You can have good debt, like owning a property is a decent debt, or you can have credit card debt and personal loan debt, which is not good debt at all. So, understanding these things is very important. And unfortunately, still now, there's no education around.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's interesting because last night I was watching this video. It was like this court video, right? And it was this child suing their parent because they felt like, well, I did good in college. I'm 21 years old, got a 4.0. I'm a star athlete, that I deserve a Lamborghini, for example. And that, I can't believe that my parent gifted me, an electric car, right? But still, they aren't cheap. But it was just, you know, the it was more on the identity of looking good to friends and dates and all that kind of stuff, instead of that financial literacy of like, and being and having gratitude, to say, hey, thank you, parent, for gifting me this amazing, wonderful vehicle. But was operating on the ego side of like, no, I deserve blank because of blank and blank. And it's just like, oh my gosh, like just no financial literacy, no financial awareness,
Just
um,
entitlement mentality and ego.
entitlement.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know, from a parent who came into this, into this country, you know, no parents because they had been deceased, and no college education, but you know, made it for themselves. So yeah, so it was very interesting. So when you were talking about that, and then the lack of just financial literacy on the younger generation, I mean, I know like when I was in high school in the 90s, very little, and you would think that with all the advancements they would have um, improved on that literacy part, but
No, haven't.
yeah.
I find it very interesting that the system still doesn't support financial literacy. And I think, the government doesn't want us to be financially abundant. They want us to be workers and they want us, and I think there's a whole, and I'm not a conspiracy theorist by any means, but I don't think it serves them to have, the whole population affluent. I think they create dependence because it works. They
Yep.
create loans so people can pay it off and they can make money on interest. Like it's all part of this system. And really, it's up to us to educate ourselves on, well, what does financial literacy mean for me? What does
Yep.
financial freedom actually mean for me? Not what somebody else is dictating to me. And what do I need to learn in order to have that? It's okay to go, you know what? I don't know this stuff and I can learn about it. There's so many resources in the world. And today we've got information at our fingertips, right? You can learn how to do anything or find a good mentor or role model. But don't
Absolutely.
take advice. And this is one thing I say to people all the time. Don't take advice from somebody who's got a life that you don't want.
No.
Right? Like, really, people are very good at giving advice, but it's like, do I really want to take advice from you when I'd rather be taking advice from this person who might have a couple of properties, who's got financial independence, who seems to travel a lot and have a good life? That's the advice I want to be taking, not from somebody who's kind of living from paycheck to paycheck, because people will give you advice hoping to keep you at the level that they're used to keeping you at,
Mhm.
because it makes them feel comfortable. But
Mhm.
that's not healthy either. We need to kind of think about raising ourselves and then potentially shining the light so you can raise those around you. And I think that's the real key of humanity. We want freedom and our whole being is about evolution, right? We need to kind of move upwards.
Right. Yeah. But I think leads us quite nicely into the next segment of our conversation about, talking about the without losing yourself part of this episode title, because this is important. Um, because there's a version of wealth building that many people fall into that looks like this, sacrificing everything for the goal, hustle harder than everyone around you will, delay living until you've made it,
That one you
right?
see all the time, right?
Oh my
People,
gosh.
I'll wait till I
Yes.
retire, then I'll go on holidays. Well, no, live now.
Live now. Exactly. Exactly. I see that one all the time too. And then measure your worth by your net worth. And what they end up with, if they get there at all, folks, is money without meaning. A bank account that's full and a life that feels empty. So wealth without alignment isn't freedom. And you've heard us talk about alignment a lot throughout all of our episodes during season one. So I'll say that again. Wealth without alignment isn't freedom. It's just a more expensive cage to live in.
And who wants a
Um,
cage? Not me.
oh God, no, no, no. So that's why alignment is so important.
And that's why the word intention also is important here, because we need to intentionally build wealth that looks different, right?
Mhm.
We don't want to have this sacrificing my soul and losing my family because I'm working so hard and not spending quality time, or waiting until retirement to live and not living now. We need to intentionally build wealth that looks different, that's
Hmm.
aligned, as Jason said, to who we are. And we've got a bit of a framework. So we'll go through this, and just have a think about it, right? Number one step is to get clear on what your money is actually for. Ask yourself, what does money make possible in my life? Like, not in somebody else's. Like, what is it in my life that money would make possible? And what does financial freedom actually look like for me specifically? Not to match the Joneses, or what other people have kind of imprinted. But what does that financial freedom actually look like for me? And the third question, am I building wealth towards something, or am I just running from fear? And I think so many people are just running from fear or running from scarcity, but they're not actually building towards something, like legacy building almost. And I think we've got to shift the narrative on that. So I'll ask those questions again. What does money make possible in my life? What does financial freedom actually look like for me? And am I building wealth towards something, or am I just running from fear? Because the truth is, if we've got vague goals and vague kind of views about this, then we get vague results. And when we're clear on what we're building towards, then every financial decision becomes more aligned. It becomes motivated because we've got something that we're building towards. Um, and it kind of keeps us in check, and it gives us a bit of direction. So we need to be making every financial decision more aligned to what we're building, not running
Hmm.
from scarcity and fear. So that's the first point that I wanted to talk about here, really about getting clear on what money is actually for. The second point is our favorite word, regulate. Regulate your nervous system around money. Do your box breathing before you look at your finances, or use your five senses to calm your farm and get into the present moment. Because often this feels uncomfortable to do. So we need to regulate first. Sorry, just took a breath of air and almost choked on it. So slow your breathing down, do the box, or do the in for 4 and out for 8, or go for a walk, but do whatever you need to do. Ground yourself and remove judgment. It's not about beating yourself up before you open the app or anything like that. It's about removing judgment and getting clear and making that kind of weekly money date with yourself for 20 minutes, even, without judgment, but really having a look at, where am I this week? What's come in? What's gone out? What am I working towards? Have I made the correct decisions towards that? Because if we do this, it does more for our financial well-being than any spreadsheet you'll ever have.
Yeah.
Clarity calms the brain, and it calms our nervous system. And when our brain and our nervous system is calm, then we can make calm financial decisions, right? In a way that's actually of service to us. So that's the second point. I wanted just to say it again, regulate, regulate, regulate before you start looking at your money, because it will bring up emotion. Because as we've said earlier in today's conversation, money is emotional. The third point or tip here is to rewrite your identity story. You can't behave your way to wealth if your identity says you don't belong. So we have to shift it. We really need to shift from those internal narratives of I'm bad with money into something more like I'm learning to manage money intentionally. We don't have to lie and say I'm great with money, but we can be truthful about I'm learning to manage money intentionally, right? I'm not bad with money anymore. I'm learning skills here. So we can kind of shift the narrative. Instead of saying I can't afford that, ask yourself instead, how can I make this possible? Right? Again, it shifts the motor neurons in your brain, and it gets you into action. And this is one that I have to keep remembering because, my kids are always, I want, I want, I want. And I have heard those words come out of my mouth. Oh, we can't afford that right now. Or no, or uh, actually, no. So now I'm starting to ask them, well, how can you make that possible? So I'm teaching them good habits now around thinking about money instead of kind of creating the narrative of scarcity. We often think that money is stressful, but actually money is a tool that I'm learning to use well. So again, if we can shift that narrative, money's a tool that I'm learning to use well. It kind of drives that internal behavior. It shifts our internal identity. It changes the story that we're telling ourselves, and then that changes the result. So really, we need to start thinking about rewriting that identity story and catching ourselves when we speaking or thinking anything that isn't about learning and growth, right? We want to kind of look at not just the outcome, but the shifts that we're making along the way. The fourth step really is to build small evidence loops because the brain trusts evidence, right? And we've got lots of evidence around why it wasn't good, but we need to start kind of creating and building this evidence trust bank um, because we want to have the evidence, not just the intention. So, Jason talked earlier about, catch yourself doing things right and saying, oh, good things happen to me always. Or, when you get those little windfalls, saying, thanks for the abundance in my account today. Because the more that we do this, um, the more we're building these pieces of evidence that the brain really likes. And you don't need to overhaul everything at once. It's not about, okay, you wake up tomorrow and be considerably different. What you need is small, consistent financial wins that teach your brain that money is safe and that I am somebody who manages money well, right? So open up those weekly accounts and have a bit of a look. And if you notice that you've even got $5 more this week than you had last week in your bank account saved, celebrate it. Set up automatic saving transfers. And what I want to say about this is pay yourself first, right? Even if it's just a small amount of $10, $50, it doesn't matter, but pay yourself first before you pay for anything else. Because a lot of people will pay all their bills and all their living expenses and all the stuff and then try and save last. And that doesn't work because there's usually nothing left. But if you pay yourself first, miraculously, you can still manage all of those other things and you've got money also sitting in the bank. I don't know how it works, but it absolutely does. That's one that I tried for myself when I was living from paycheck to paycheck. And then the more you see the increase in your bank account, the more motivated you become, and then you actually end up saving more. So track 1 month of your spending with curiosity and not shame. We've really got it. We can't measure or we can't manage what we don't measure. So we've got to have a look at, okay, what am I actually doing? And what small shifts can I make that are consistent that's going to give me a better money story for my world? And then the fifth point, and this is Jason's favorite one to talk about, is values, right? Align money with your values. And this is probably the piece that most financial advice completely misses. It's what do you want, but it's not what do you value, what's important to you, because this sustainable wealth isn't built on restriction. It's built on that alignment with who you truly are. And when you know what matters to you most, what your values are, then you start designing a financial life that actually funds those things intentionally. So it's not just a budget that says, to restrict your spending, but it becomes more of a spending plan that says, here's what I'm choosing and here's the reason why. I'm choosing to put this here because I value this. And so whatever that is for you, start thinking about that. A budget built on deprivation fails, but a spending plan that's built on your values lasts a lifetime. And it keeps increasing as your values evolve, right, and grow. So again, we really need to align money to our values. It's so important.
Yeah. And Leanne, I've been hearing a lot about this lately, especially like on little financial ads, like on social media where, there's the recommendation, and I would love your input on this, of, as soon as you can, put your first $1,000 into a high yield savings account. Would you agree with that?
Listen, I would say absolutely. If you can put any, it doesn't even have to be $1,000. Like, I don't know about in America, but in Australia, you can have bank accounts that have like a high interest savings account that's attached to it, but you can't pull money out of it at an ATM. So you're transferring money in. So absolutely. And if you've got money, what happens is compound interest. So if you've got $1,000 in the bank and you get 10% interest, they calculate interest daily, right? Um, so it's increasing every day, even if it's just by 5 cents or 10 cents or a dollar, it doesn't matter. It's increasing. And then so tomorrow they're calculating the interest on 11, $1,000 and $1,001 maybe. And then, 1,002, and they keep doing this. So these high yield accounts are very good for savings. But also you need to diversify. Like, don't just have all your money in the bank. Have money in property if you can. Have money potentially in some managed funds, but really have a look at using a fiduciary in America. So you're getting really good advice and lower fees. And in Australia, speak to a financial account advisor because um, they are fiduciaries here. They have to be. So you want to have kind of money in a few different pots, but you've got to
Yeah.
start somewhere. And having don't wait till you've got $1,000. See if you can open up an account with $50 and then just
Yeah.
keep adding to it every day or every week or every month.
Absolutely. And then another little trick that I heard was, as much as you can automate.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And if you work for somebody, the automation should come from them if they can do it for you. Like before the money even hits your account, and then you've got the automation in place to transfer it somewhere else. See if your employer can put the money into a separate account for you. So it might be that you get, 80% of your income into one account, but 20% goes into a savings account. That again make it a little bit harder to pull money out. So not an
Yeah.
account that you can go and use an ATM to draw it out. Like make it a bit more complex
Yeah.
because that'll put a pause in your impulsivity.
Yeah. And it's always one of those tricks too, where I've heard it's like, if you don't see it and you don't get used to it, you just, it's not something that's always top of mind to have to go, oh, I need to go draw out this much, from this account. Because if you don't see it, it's like, okay,
Yeah.
it's not there to spend anyways. So
Yeah. And that's why the pay yourself first thing really works because if you wait till the end, there's not much left, right? Or there's so little left that you kind of think, oh, bugger it. I'm just going to go and buy the handbag or the pair of shoes because there's no point saving, $20, $30 or whatever. But if you actually put that money aside first, you'll be astounded at how you can still do everything else. You might still have a bit of money left over, but you've got savings. So value yourself enough to pay yourself first.
something which I think, goes well into our real talk reflection. Um, so I want folks and our listeners, whether you're listening live or listening at another time when you have time to listen to this episode, I want you to sit with a few questions for this week. And the first question is, what was the money story in your household growing up? And is it still running your personal finances today? Second question is, are you building wealth towards something meaningful or just away from fear? And the third question is, what would your relationship with money look like if you genuinely believed you deserved financial freedom? I think that question is worth actually repeating. Actually, what would your relationship with money actually look like if you genuinely believed you deserved financial freedom? And the final question is, what is one small action you could take this week to build new financial evidence? And I think those are some powerful questions to sit with, whether you sit with them on a walk or sit with them in a journaling session or sit with them in a safe space with someone super close who you trust that you can have an open conversation with.
Here's something that I want to leave you with because I think it's important. I work with people every day who are smart, who are capable, who are accomplished. Um, and a lot of them are women, but not just women. And what I find is that these people can be completely disconnected from their own financial power, not because they're not good enough, but because no one ever taught them that they were allowed to be in control, right? And financial literacy is not a privilege; it's a basic human right. And this is why it gets up my nose. And the reason I'm so passionate about it around women, Jason, and I don't know about in America, but in Australia, the biggest demographic of homelessness was women over 50 who
Mm,
were getting divorced and then ended up potentially with a health issue and they lost everything. And to me, that is so sad because they've relinquished the rights to their husband. My husband manages the money. They don't know anything about it. They've always kind of just lived in that, and then all of a sudden, things change and they've got no idea, and I think it's the saddest thing. So when women understand money, and I mean really understand it, everything changes. Not just their bank balance, but their confidence, their choices, the legacy that they leave for their kids, the lessons that they teach their kids, their freedom, everything changes. And it's not just for women, but that's my absolute passion, right? Is to shift, because I've seen it. I've seen it in my own family. I've seen people make decisions and be stuck in situations that were horrific because they didn't have financial literacy. So when women control their finances, they control their lives. Full stop. And that's a
mhm.
good thing, right? Full stop, comma, full stop, right? Like we've got to
Amazing
be
thing.
we've got to be in control of our lives and not relinquishing power to others. That's not to say that you can't work with your husband, but have an understanding, be part of the decisions. Don't just relinquish your rights. Um, and learn the skills. It's not that hard.
Yeah.
And if you're interested, there is a program that I run specifically for women. Feel free to reach out to me if that's something that you're interested in, which teaches women both the internal world and the external world. So we look at wealth from the identity, and we also look at it from the strategy and the understanding and the literacy. Um, it's yeah, and again, it's something I'm completely passionate about because I just don't think anybody shouldn't have financial literacy. It's a human right.
Hey, 100%. I agree.
Sorry, I've got on my bandwagon there, but it's just like, oh,
No,
it makes me
gosh, no
mad.
worries. No worries. It makes me mad too. And um, yes, lots more to talk about that
Yeah.
or talk on that. All right, so let's move into our top three takeaways. If I can get my mouse moving here. Okay, there we go. Took a moment there. But our top three tips from today's conversation. Our first tip is that money is emotional before it's mathematical because your nervous system shapes your financial behavior more than your knowledge does. So if you're not regulated, folks, you're going to be automatically in that emotional state versus that clarity state um, of how you want to move behaviorally forward with your finances. Um, our second tip is that your financial identity drives your financial reality. So change the story, which changes the results. And thirdly, our third tip is sustainable wealth is built on alignment, not restriction. Fund your values, not just your obligations, and create your legacy. Anything else you'd like to put in there, Leanne?
Yeah, there's so much more that I could say, but I'm not going to, Jason, because we could be here for another hour. Um, but and not from fear was the only thing I wanted to add. Don't look at money um, as running away from fear or running away from scarcity. We
Yeah.
really need to have a look at what is my value, what do I want to create, what is the legacy I want to bring, and work towards that, not away from fear. Um, that energetic shift alone just has such a profound impact on our internal state that we see more opportunities then.
All right. So top
So
books and resources.
we've got heaps of books and resources, and there's so many more that we could speak to. But the first book here is The Psychology of Money by Morgan Housel, and I've probably recommended this book before, but it's a brilliant exploration of why we behave the way we do with money. The fear, the ego, the greed, the comparison, all of that sort of stuff that shows up. And this book shows that good financial outcomes have less to do with intelligence and more to do with our mindset, which we've talked about, our identity, and then the behaviors that we implement. So it's a really great book to have a look at, highly recommended. You're a Badass at Making Money by Jen Shapiro. And it's a funny, bold, honest, and empowering book, especially for women, where she tackles money blocks, self-worth issues, and subconscious scarcity patterns with humor and practical tools. So, she's written a whole lot of You Are a Badass, and this one is specifically around making money. The next two have been around for a very long time. Rich Dad, Poor Dad by Robert Kiyosaki is a modern classic around financial mindset. It kind of talks about the scarcity versus the abundance mindset and makes a compelling case for thinking like an investor, not just an earner. So it's a financial identity shift, right? And it starts here. So it's a book that I often refer to my young clients, just so they can start thinking about money in a different way. And then the last one is The Richest Man in Babylon. And this is a very old book as well, but very good. And its whole premise of this book is to pay yourself first. So it's timeless, it's simple, it's relevant. It's old parables that you can kind of look through, but the whole concept is pay yourself first. I've said that several times today. Pay yourself first. So it's a great book to read. And the other one that's not on the list that Jason and I have recently been reading is called The Science of Getting Rich by Wallace Wattles. And there's the book there. But it's also a great book, and that's all about visualization, shifting that into internal identity, and aligning yourself to the energy of money. So it's a great book as well. Now, there's some YouTube videos here. We're in control of or are we in control of our decisions by Dan Early, and how do you stop your money anxiety and build wealth by Bill Cates, not Gates. So the links for both of those will be in our TED Talk. And then there's also, in our YouTube channel. So they're the TED Talks. And then there's also the Neuroscience of Motivation and Money by Andrew Huberman, and the Talk About Money and Your Brain with Mel Robbins. So they're all good to watch. Anything, one of them, just do something. Make a commitment today to do one thing differently, because it's what we do today that shifts our tomorrow.
Absolutely. All right. Episode 31. We're almost to the end of this series, which is so hard to believe. But next week's conversation is going to be on relationships that elevate you. Choosing circles that expand your life. This conversation is going to be incredibly rich. And so Leanne and I are super excited to delve into that and to give you the gold nuggets and the tips and tricks and tools that you can put into your toolbox. And it will be the first week of June. So it'll take place on Wednesday, June 3rd here in the US, and Thursday, June 4th in Australia. And with that, we have 2 more episodes after that. And then we have a couple of special Pride episodes that we will be doing, since it is Rainbow Month next month. So we're excited to end season 1 on a prideful note. So with that, I think we're ready to close out.
Yeah. So before we move into our outro, I just want to double click and ask you to think about what's one money story from your childhood that might still be running your finances today. And feel free to drop it into the comments or to reach out to Jason and I. We're more than happy to respond, um, because you're not alone. And naming it is the first step to changing it. And we need to change the narrative around money. So I'd love to hear from you. And next week's session is all about your circle, your courage circle, I like to call it. So thank you, Jason. I can't wait to have that conversation, and we'll see you there.
Absolutely. I'm excited for that conversation as well. So, as always, thanks for joining us for today's conversation on money, meaning, and alignment, building wealth without losing yourself.
Yeah, we hope that again it sparked something new, an insight, a fresh perspective, an identity shift that you've now noticed and want to change, or even just have a question that's worth exploring even further.
Exactly. And as always, our mission here at Let's Talk is simple: to have the conversations that matter and to remind you, you don't have to figure out this complicated, complex thing called life alone. We're here to have the conversations along with you and beside you and help you along the way.
So, as usual, if you've liked today's episode, do all the things, share it with your friends, subscribe, like, and keep the conversation going with us.
Because when we talk,
We really talk.
and anything is possible
So, let's talk
with real conversations.
and limitless possibilities. See you later, everybody.
Everyone, bye.